Hi, welcome to some Christmas ideas with GourmetQuilter. This is part of our 2020 series. There's 20 different ideas and we are up to idea number 6. How amazing is that already? And so what we're going to do this time is a little gift bag that you could add some little charms to, or little bells, or you could change the colours, of course. And I just thought it was kind of cute. Or you could do it without the drawstring and make just a really cute little something to put something in and put some bells on it. But of course it's not really good for secret gifts with bells on because they're a little bit noisy. There's a pattern in case anyone's interested for all the 20 things through GourmetQuilter.com, through 2020 Tasty Treats. We're making ornaments and table decorations and gift bags and all sorts of other things. So I'll get started on showing you how to do this. As I said, there's a pattern. So in the pattern there's a shape that you can use for cutting out the shapes of the little bag. I've gone ahead and cut mine out and started making mine. So this little bag here has got the little drawstring in it, which we'll go through how to make that. And I've just popped some little charms on these little corners here. And on this one, as I said, I've done the little bells and haven't made the little drawstring casing. But basically the bag is made the same way. So what we need is a pattern piece, and there's some markings on the pattern piece so that we can mark onto our sides of the bag. And we need to have a lining for the bag. So I've made the lining all in one colour, and then I've just used two colours for the outside of the bag. You might want to do it all in one colour, you might want to do 4 colours, there's so many things, so many decisions in life, hey? So I'm doing another one with 2 colours on the outside and 1 colour on the inside. So my 2 colours on the outside are going to be this blue and purple. So what we want to do is we want to pair them up with one of each if we're making the 2 colours like I am. And on the pattern piece here there's a little dotted line across there because that's the fold line where we fold it down to get that point there. And we just want to mark that on our pattern piece where we're sewing to. There's some dots on the pattern here. We want to mark those dots and the little line that comes out because we're going to have to snip in. So we need to start and stop sewing at those dots, but we'll also be cutting in as well. So I've actually already gone ahead. You need to really mark everything because then it doesn't matter which way you pick things up. So I'm going to go ahead now and start sewing. So what we want to do when we've got our pairs together, we're doing 2 pairs, is start at this point here and come all the way down to the bottom point here, just with a regular 1/4 inch seam. So we want to start and stop. So start with a little back stitch or lock stitch at the beginning. So I'll go ahead and we'll do this so that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm just starting there and I've got a little lock stitch at the beginning, and then I'm coming all the way around here. Just need to put my little thing on. And I am just going to back stitch at the end of the seam here as well, we think. That's it. And so then what I want to do is I want to trim that seam just a little bit. It's just a 1/4 inch seam now, but I just want to take away down to about 1/8 of an inch, or maybe not quite that far, but just trim off some of the excess. This is going to be inside the bag. We won't see it because it's all cut on the curve. It shouldn't be any sort of a problem, but we only want to cut as far as our little line that we've marked there. And then we want to snip into that seam, but don't snip your sewing at that point, but leave the seam allowance on the rest of it there. So you can see I've snipped into the point there, and then we can open that out, which is going to be the outside, so you can see it sits nicely with that curve. By trimming the seam down, it just allows it to sit a little bit better as far as the curving goes, because then it's not really easy to press it because of the shape of the bag overall. So I've gone ahead and made my second one already, so make sure that you sew them the same way so that the sewing the same side, so that when you put them together they're going to alternate around. So they should both be just the same. At this stage we've got a point here, we've trimmed our seams down to here. So what we're going to do now is open those out and have them right sides together, and continue on doing exactly the same thing here, but we do need to keep an eye on this point here, that it intersects well. Other than that, we're going from this point all the way around to this point here. Again with our 1/4 inch, and we'll be trimming that down as well. So I'll just go ahead and we'll get this seam done. And these seams here should nestle the way we've got it. Even though they're a small seam allowance, they should still nestle together nicely. And just make sure your points and things are staying together there. And a little back stitch to finish. So we're going to trim that seam down, but also we want to do that little snip in. Don't cut your stitching. And I say these things because I know how easy it is to do that. And we're just going to trim that seam from that all along the sewing as well, just down a little bit there. It'll just sit that little bit better. And then the fun starts. So these are a great little bag. They don't take too long to make. Very useful. Of course, you don't have to give them away. They could be little bags for you for things. So there we've got our bag. We can turn it out the right way just to have a little look and make sure that things are going to look okay. Run your fingers along those seams so that they're going to sit nicely, although we will be turning it back in a minute to actually do the next bit. So that's looking pretty good. And then I've actually gone ahead and done already the lining. So it's exactly the same, except that it's all in one colour, except for one thing. I've left a gap in one of the seams, that last one that came all the way around. I've just left a gap, maybe a couple of inches or so, or less, just for turning out the right way in the lining piece so that it's inside. So now we need to put these bits together. So we've got that all made, and we've got another one here out of lining. So I've got this one sitting so that it's inside out, and this one we're going to turn the right way out so that we can sit it inside this one. And then we're going to stitch around these nice pointy edges here. And so because I've gone ahead and I trimmed my seams just the same, and I've cut in to that little point. Those little points there should meet. They should be able to open out, because when we turn it out the right way, they're actually opening out. So that's why we have to clip into that little seam point there. So when you stitch this piece here, I suggest that just because it is a little bit fiddly in those corners where they meet and things, that we actually start sewing on one of the straight bits here, and so that when you come back you can meet up there, because we can go all the way around, because we've left a gap in the lining for turning. We can go all the way around. So I'm just going to start sewing again with that 1/4 inch seam allowance. So we'll just start sewing here so that you see how it goes. And just pivot at the corners. So when you're coming up to where it meets here, just make sure your seams are sitting together at this meeting point over here, and you should be able to pivot at that same point where you stopped sewing and snipped into. It looks probably a little awkward. It's just a funny little shape because everything bunches at those corners. It's not actually that bad to do at all. So just round to each point and then into each little intersection there. So it's just the same thing now all the way round back to where we started. So I'll go ahead and get this done. So I've gone around and I've stitched my 4 points. Now I think it's just a good idea just to snip off those actual points so that when we turn it out the right way, they won't be in the way. We don't need to particularly trim this part of the seam. It's going to sit fine in these little bits. You can if you want to, but you don't need to. But the corners to trim off is a really good idea, because when we turn them out the right way, it's much better to have less fabric in that bulky bit. So now we want to turn it through that gap that we left in the lining. So we're going to bring the bag, everything through that hole. We'll get there. And then this is where we might need some sort of a little tool to help us turn those points out. I've got my little trusty pencil here that does a good job of this. So just go around and push all those little points out so that you get them as reasonably sharp as you can, because those are the little bits that are going to hang down here that we might sew something on, or not if you don't want anything on them. Of course they're fine just left as points. So I might go ahead and get this sorted, and then I'll show you what we're going to do with it next. So I'm still just finishing off these edges. I've transferred my tool to my trusty chopstick. I'm just running around that seam, around those points, because that will help it sit nicely, and then we're going to press it. I just find that running something along a seam line like that really just helps the fabric learn where it has to learn to live now. So I'm going to push that. So there's still a gap there that needs to be you can either slip stitch it, you could machine it. That just needs to be stitched up. In the meantime, we just want to press these points now. So have it sitting as flat as you reasonably can for the side, and press the point. Try and have these bits sitting out as nicely as they will, and I think generally they play quite nicely. So just doing the points at the moment, and then we'll just come back and make sure that those little intersections are sitting nicely as well. So I've got all my points sitting fairly well. So now I'm just going to open it out at the little intersection there, and it should sit out, generally speaking, pretty well, well enough that we can just give it a little bit of a press there, because it doesn't really need to be pressed flat, because these little points are going to be flipped over, but it just helps everything sit a little bit better if it's had a little bit of pressing at this point. And we're nearly there. Right. So then you can just be pushing that lining and that seam out together. As I said, we've still got to stitch that hole up, I haven't forgotten. Now when I was making this one, all I actually did next, I do need the iron still, was fold those down, and then I stitched the little bells onto the points, and I just left it like that because it didn't seem to me that it needed any more. If you just wanted a little open baskety type bag, you could sit a little jar of jam in it, you could sit, oh my goodness, you could sit chocolates in it. Of course you could sit chocolates in it. If you didn't want to close up the little bag for some reason, then that makes a really nice little option. But I'm going to show you how to do the casing part so that we can pop a string in it as well. So I'm just pressing those points over so that it's a straight line, pretty much this line here that's on the pattern piece, so that that sits straight around that top edge there. So you can see that that's sitting quite nicely. The bells of course help weight it down a little bit when they're on, and so all we need to do now is stitch around there. So I'll just get my machine set up ready to do that, and I'll show you just how we're going to go ahead and do that. So the casings now, I just changed all the thread on my machine to a better colour. So I'm just going to turn that inside out now because I want to stitch around, and it'll be easier for me to, I like to stitch onto this side, and it'll be easier if it's inside out to turn it through on the machine there. So I'm just going to sew approximately a good 1/4 of an inch down. I've just got to be able to thread some narrow cord through. So from the fold, just a 1/4 of an inch all the way around. So even over this part here where there is no fold, just keep going around. And that little bit that we're stitching away from the fold will give the space to thread just a thin cord or maybe a small ribbon through. Bags like this are so much fun, and they always make a little gift so much more special if you're going to use it as a little gift bag. And of course everything makes chocolates special, so I've done that. I'll just snip that thread off. Oh, and I have stitched my little gap closed. I actually just machined it. I've just done a little bit of stitching along there so that that's all done. And so now I can turn it out again. So those little flaps will now sit down nicely. So you can always decide later whether you want to put cord through, you want to sew bells on, or charms on, or beads on, so many things. And then I've just got this very fine gold metallic cord. So if you've got some sort of a bodkin needle type thing to thread through, so we're just going to go through. So we're going to go all the way round back to here again with one piece, and then we're going to come in and do the other end as well. These draw up much better if you do the double cord. So you don't want to have too wide a ribbon in there because there isn't a lot of space to be making a much bigger casing. And anyway, the bag is only little, so something fairly small is good. And I'm just going to knot it. It's not big enough to start making little fabric ends for this particular cord. And a little knot is quite nice. You could always pop a little bead on the cord. And then we pop the other one in from the other side. So on the opposite side. So this little bag doesn't draw up where you think it's going to on the sides. It is on those points because it has to be between the little points. So now I start threading through from the opposite side to put the other one through. Such a cute little bag. And if you've got a few nice beads or charms or things, it's always nice to use them on little things like this. If you don't have, then I don't suppose anyone will know anything about it if you haven't got any. Just make sure that the other end doesn't get pulled through. And you don't want your cord to be too long because it is only a little bag, and if you've got sort of reams of cord, it's not always helpful unless you're wanting a long cord, of course. So again, I'm just tying a little knot with those two ends, and that should hold fine. I think that's looking really kind of cute. And then you can just draw that up from both ends there, and you've got this nice little sort of little flowery shape that appears with those little corners turned back. You can leave it, as I said, open. You can sew. I've got some bells here to sew on, but I won't do them now because you can see what it looks like with bells on, or charms. But you could sew something onto those little points there. And I just thought that was a really neat little gift bag, something to put some little treats in for somebody, or something to stand something else in, or a little bowl of chocolates to sit around at Christmas time, or what else can I think of? I'm sure there's lots of nice things that you could think of to put in a little bag like that. So that was just a fun little gift bag as part of our Christmas series. That was idea number 6. I will see you again with Christmas idea number 7.